So today we have some fun things that we're going to be doing, but I have Jim Emerson with me. He's engineering manager with Star Technical Risk Agency, and him and I had developed about 4 years ago a something called the combinational approach to firefighting and waste and recycling facilities. Again, this is more of a framework and recommendations. So we've worked on for the past couple weeks. We've worked on updating it, making it a little more simple. So Jim's on as well, who'll be doing that. Jim is also a fire protection and mechanical engineer. He's the guy who goes into a lot of these facilities and does your risk mitigation or your audits, right, to ensure that you have the proper safety procedures and the proper fire protection equipment and all those different things. So hopefully you will hopefully you will get a lot out of this. Again, I'll save. I mean, we're going to kind of work together as we go. Please, if you have questions, let me know. Send them in chat. Feel free to ask. This is not going to be a formal presentation in that sense, so you're definitely not interrupting. Also, if you could mute your phones, that'd be awesome, and we will get started. So, and the other thing, it is getting recorded. So if you do want, I just got asked that question. So yes, it is being recorded. So we will share this with you after, and I appreciate you guys coming. So as most people know on this call, I've been looking through the reported fires and waste and recycling facilities for the past, since 2016. And we've seen a decent amount of fires. I'm not going to get into the full scope today. Really, the idea, if you want to see the the annual report that I've put together for 2017, 18, or 19, they're available. You can email me. I'll give you my information as well if you don't have it. But really, I mean, we've seen a significant amount of fires in waste and recycling facilities, and I think when we look at it, we've been seeing these fires forever, right? And just based on traditional hazards, so propane tanks, pool chemicals, oil changes, all the things that we throw away in our recycling and our waste stream. We're now in unprecedented times, and I hate to use the term that everybody else is using, but um, I believe that there is something happening now that we're seeing that deserves a lot more attention, which is, you know, and I'll get into kind of what those trends are, but we're seeing times in an April we've never seen before. The one thing I will say is that this is a global problem, right? There are, when you add to those traditional hazards, which are the lithium-ion battery, issues that are happening, or the fact that lithium-ion batteries are getting into our waste stream and recycling stream at a rate that it doesn't seem to be stopping. We've seen globally that in 2018 was really that first year that we started seeing an increase in fires. But when we really got into a global perspective of 2018 was when Japan saw a ton of increases. We saw a ton of increases from the claims data from insurance companies, and Jim's with Star Risk Agencies, which is one of the larger reinsurers, and then as well, we were seeing these in the U.S. as well, and in the reported data. So the other thing is we're able to see, just in our role or in my role at Fire Rover, we're able to see all the fires that we're putting out, and that's not included in the reported fires that I've been working with. And I know the data that I've created is going to be put into part of EREF survey. So if you are part of EREF, if you haven't been part of the survey and you are an operator of a waste recycling or scrap metal facility, if you could either ask me, or I know Ann has it and I know EREF has it, but if you could ask for that link. This survey is really trying to get a hold on the industry and how many problems we are seeing. I think I believe in the Volvo approach, which is safety doesn't know competition, and we should all be working together and sharing best practices. I truly believe in setting. It's not about like what your plan looks like. You can argue about the different details, but the most important thing is to actually plan, and really walk through and train and work with your fire department. So that's something that we'll get into with Jim as well, and part of the combinational approach. The To go specifically into what I was seeing with waste and recycling fires in March of this year, I've already seen 16 fires in April, and over half of those have been waste and recycling. In March of this year, what we saw was increase in waste, paper, plastic recycling. The fires as a percent versus March data from 16, 17, 18, and 19. So really, at the end of the day, I mean, we're seeing an increase, but the question, I think we've seen kind of unprecedented times in the sense of we don't know what is really going to happen over the next few weeks and months. When I first started doing this 3 weeks ago, in the first week of April, there was only one fire. I've never once seen one fire in any week in the past 5 years. So, that to me in itself is a little bit insane. And I think the idea is that the second week I saw about, I think, 10 fires, and this week so far I've seen, we're up to 16, as I was saying, for the month. So I'd say it's about 15 fires we've seen in the second and third weeks. And most of those, are over 50% of those, are waste and recycling fires, transfer station fires versus MRF fires. So we definitely are seeing those. Now, again, in Fire Rover, we're seeing MRF fires and transfer station fires occurring more now in the past 2-3 weeks than we've seen typical, right? But again, our typical, it's almost, the data that I've been reporting for 4 years, our Fire Rover data is getting better and better as we go, and it's definitely going to lag behind. But we have protected over 200 facilities. Again, some of those are waste, some of those are hazard materials, some of those are, organics and electronics and C&D and others. But we have seen an increase in transportation specific fires for some of our clients. So just to kind of get into why in March did we see a lower percent of incidences? There were a lot of there were a lot of locations that were shut down, and we're still seeing that where recycling drop-offs are shut down. I believe that we have a quarantine effect that we're dealing with, which is the spring cleaning of all spring cleanings. It's been, normally people talk about spring cleaning and it's used in marketing and advertising, but really at the end of the day, who really does a full spring cleaning? When everyone's been quarantined in their homes, they're doing full spring cleanings, right? Which meaning, basement and attics and garages and every closet that they have. And again, all that material is typically, if they're educated enough to recycle, because we as an industry have educated them, they can't leave their house theoretically to go to these drop-off points, and a lot of the drop-off points are closed. So just like anything else, we'll see a lot of this stuff will end up in our waste and recycling bins on the curbside. So what happens with all the old computers when they get taken out, or all the old iPhones, and everybody has a box or two of those, and I'm sure you can relate. School closures, again, 132,000 schools in the United States have closed. It's a big number, and they still have how many lockers that still need to be cleaned out. And the question is that going to be allowed for the students to actually go in and clean these out, or are the janitors going to go in and literally just throw these all in, and you're going to get these in your waste or in your waste stream? Think about how many lithium-ion batteries are inside every one of those lockers, right? A greeting card that has a lithium-ion battery, or calculators, or there's just a ton of things from the amount of lithium-ion batteries. Nobody went on spring break. People aren't traveling, right? So I think that's a kind of a bigger thing. Everyone's at home, so you're getting all those pieces. And then I think another huge piece, which I kind of call it the early Christmas, is that we always see a spike in the fourth quarter, but what we're seeing is that everybody went, and I don't want to call it hoarding, but we ordered like we've never seen before, right? Target's numbers are up 8-12%, Walmart's numbers, Amazon's numbers are up. Well, all those things cause fires and issues. So what are the risks that have been put on our facilities? And then one of the things that I know there's a lot of associations, I know that EPA's on, I think one of the really important things that we have to understand is that firefighters are still dealing with social distancing. And, at the end of the day, the firefighters don't want to go in and fight these fires normally, but now they have to social distance. So when they're wearing the respirators, that's one thing, because, they actually have controlled breathing. So they're not worried necessarily when they're inside fighting the fires. But, as you've ever seen or if you've ever seen fires that happen, at a lot of these facilities, you might have a 5, 6 alarm fire, and you have all these fire departments that are there, and it's a little bit of mass chaos. And now understand that they're dealing with having to be 6 to 10 feet away from each other. So the more we can educate our constituents on making sure that even now they're more apt to be risk averse of what they're putting in their recycling and their waste, causes less fires, which hopefully will stop our fire department from having to actually go fight these fires, and forcing them to take more of a defensive approach when they get to these facilities. So with that said, I am going to introduce Jim. Jim, how are you, sir?
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here, and thanks so much for coming to our little session today.
Perfect. So Jim's going to get into, I mean, he's with Star Tech. I'll let him get into his background as well. And then again, if you have questions or anything, just let us know in between and we can go through it. And then after that, we'll get into some videos. And, there was a couple videos that I can share of transfer station fires that have occurred in April. I'll share some of those and some of the, protection techniques that Jim will be discussing as well. So Jim, talk away.
All right.
Cool.
Hey, everybody. So Jim Emerson here, and technical service manager with Star Tech. I started off as a mechanical engineer, kind of the Swiss Army knife of engineering, and basically transitioned over to fire protection engineering, which is basically designing sprinklers, fire protection systems, and analyzing those. There's a lot of hydraulics, valves, pumps, so kind of falls right into that mechanical basket. And I was a senior specialist with FM Global, which is a leading industrial insurer with an engineering base, and also the chief engineer for AIG for a number of years before joining StarTech. So I've been to a number of industrial facilities, including waste energy, recycling, transfer, metal operations, metal scrap, and things. And what I noticed over the years is there really weren't a lot of codes and standards or protocols that were really directed towards your occupancy. NFPA, International Electric Code, fire alarm codes, things like that really weren't geared towards what you folks do, because your occupancy is a little different, and we'll get into that as to why and what the challenges are from a fire standpoint. And just to kind of tie myself and Ryan together, I saw a aftermath of an extremely large fire. I think it was 80-90 million dollars in damage at a waste to energy facility. Fire that began on a tipping floor and went into the bunker and took many days to control. And really, that aftermath really made everything gel as to what happened, what went right, what went wrong, what took too long, what was overlooked. All of that really helped me to coalesce the engineering that I wanted to bring forward and discuss with you today, called the combinational approach. And then finding Ryan several years ago with Fire Rover, and having one of the technical solutions that's out there, made me work with Ryan to put this together. So with that being said, I have, just to start us off, fire basics. We use there's just a couple of fire engineering terms that I'll use today. One of them is called the seat, which is where a fire begins, and a fire tries to grow vertically. So we kind of all know that intuitively, but that's very important here, as you'll see. And also a fire which is deeply seated, in other words, kind of not out in the wide open, but underneath some of your materials, papers, plastics, mixed commodities, that type of thing, mismatched metals, so forth. So something that's deeply seated, it can smolder for a number of hours or days, as you know. So that's really part of the uniqueness of your occupancy. So we'll go to the next slide, which shows a picture, and I wanted to kind of outline what's also very unique about your occupancies is the very, very high vertical distance between the floor. You can see the gentleman in the middle there, just to give you scale, from the floor to the underneath of the roof or the ceiling. It's pretty high, a lot of these places, and that presents a very difficult fire challenge because, for example, if you have sprinklers which is what fire protection engineers are trained to recommend all the time, the water can't quite, it has to penetrate the uplift plume of a fire. So all those droplets can start to evaporate. And then they don't really have a lot of impact when they hit the ground, hit the material. So that high vertical space presents a very difficult fire challenge. So let's go to the next slide. So some of the things that can go wrong are a late detection. So the longer that's the period of time that elapses between the seat of the fire beginning, we call that an incipient fire, the longer of time that elapses to notification of the fire service, that can result in a vastly different outcome. One of the things that can happen in a delayed response because of a late notification is smoke really prevents the view of the seat of the fire. And just like you and me, the fire department needs to see that seat of the fire in order to know where to apply water and what to do. And the longer the fire is going, of course, the heat can threaten the building structural elements. All that heat goes up to the ceiling and it just stays there because of the deck, and the steel can start to get soft and that kind of thing, and not hold its own weight. Another thing that can happen is if the fire gets really large before they arrive, that water supply that you have, whether it's a pond, a tank, or from the water supply in town, can be kind of quickly overwhelmed. And a lot of these places, they're at the end of a dead end on a water grid, that kind of thing. So that can add to the problem. And all of these things lead to maybe the fire service saying, we don't think we can really handle this on an interior basis. We don't really think we can get control of this. So they can decide to go back into a controlled fire or defensive posture. And of course, that's bad. We don't want that. So let's talk about this combinational approach and some of the things that you can do to incorporate the combination of fire protection planning, training, the right equipment, and communication. And the goal overall, and this is another one of our fire protection engineering fancy words, the footprint. So we want to keep the fire kind of like in a box, real small, and that's what's going to lead to a good outcome. So let's take it away here with this combinational approach. And a lot of elements here. We try to coalesce this into a pretty tight grouping, and so each point here, some points cover more elements than others, but overall, really the most important element is to develop a site specific for your exact location. So sometimes you find these things that are fire prevention plans that are boilerplate or checklist. You really want to get something together that's very site specific, including before and then during, which would be the fire incident response, and then for following recovery. So before, during, after, the things that people need to do and to be ready. And I would say including the fire department in that planning, maybe over a couple of visits, bring in some lunch, get them to sit down rather than just a walking tour, but get them to really open up to you. The next element is to use, remember we talked about how important early warning is. So utilizing early fire detection technology is key here. And there's technology out there, including thermal image cameras, various kinds of smoke detection, and also some automatic equipment that can shut off key production equipment that can be interlocked. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, and I know Ryan's going to give you a lot more information on that with the cameras related to the Fire Rover. So we'll kind of keep moving here. Another element here is to kind of marry that early detection with some type of manual or remote application of either fluorine-free, which is basically green wetting agents like a foam, or water nozzles, or a combination of both. So if we get that early detection, early response with application of foam and or water, we can try to keep that fire footprint small, keep it really tight, and then notifying the fire service. And then when they come in, instead of having a brigade, focus your planning on what can you do to help the fire department when they arrive. Do they have plenty of parking because those trucks are really big? Do they have a safe area to look at the fire alarm panel? Is there an area where they can stretch out their hose and reach the fire hydrant? Sounds simple, but having those things ready can really help. Picture it's the middle of the night or raining or cold. So these things can really help out a lot. Finally, training your employees, including temps, with the plan. And it doesn't have to be very exhaustive. It can just be, here's your 1, 2, or 3 things to do. So we want the steps to take to be really, really succinct and direct, but also very thorough. All right, here we go. Second lap here. And other elements, especially with your occupancy, are having a trained loader operator available. And here's the thing. We all know in a fire, sort of panic sets in, or that initial fight or flight response, and then the fight response kicks in. We've all experienced maybe a loader goes in right away and starts removing material or related to a fire or thinking they know where it is. What we want to do is kind of slow that down and wait, because if we have early detection, early application of foam and water, everything's cool. We're keeping everything in check, getting the fire service there, giving them time to set up, and then working with them, figuring out and getting the loader to go in and just remove materials on the side, the top, then add, in pieces, sort of peeling it back, and then adding water and foam, then in pieces, so we don't have a situation where the fire flares up and goes out of control. That's what we want to avoid. So this part really sounds counterintuitive, but we need to have a very dedicated approach to that, and it really does work in the long term when you lay out a full fire scenario to do it that way.
Well, yeah, and I think,
Next,
one of the things, Jim, just to hit that, because I mean, I think this is really, really important. I think, all the time we see, just being in the front row of a lot of our customers. I mean, we'll see the loader operator, and again, I don't want to call him a hero, but he's going in and trying to fight a fire. Number one, they're breathing in the fumes, they're doing all these different things, and a lot of times they're making it worse by adding oxygen to the equation, right? So it's like one of those that if you pre-wet it and you put enough material on, and most foams and encapsulator agents like work similarly in that, they'll stop the material around it from burning. So theoretically, you want to, they'll say that, and you can talk to this, right? But, theoretically, you want to get all that material away. Well, we don't have that ability in waste and recycling, right? If you're on a tip floor, you're not going to be able to stop you're not going to be able to create an aisle between the material to stop it from burning from one to the next, right? So really, it's pre-wetting it first, and then once you see the temperature down, going in and trying to pull away with the loader, or and start to pull away the layers, and keep spraying it as we're doing this, so that it never has the chance to truly flare up. But I mean, I'll show some videos of this, and this is something that definitely makes a lot of sense for this approach.
great break there in what I was talking about, and excellent points, Ryan, because when we think of fire, it's really the one thing that imperils everyone at the same time, with its smoke, lack of oxygen, heat. It can imperil all the employees, but it's also, a hazard to the business, to the building, to the content. So it's the one thing that imperils everything. And going in too fast can really upset the balance and cause things to go out of control very quickly. So this is where we kind of need to all step back and say, no heroes. We're going to follow a methodology, and then having everything pre-wet, cooling, and then water all around it allows for the fire service to have a safer premises to enter, to make the interior attack less smoke so they can see what's going on, and then being more willing to stay in the fight inside versus falling back to just a defensive posture, and that's what we don't want.
Right, and
So
again,
excellent.
and I also don't want to say. I mean, the goal is that if you're an employee and you're standing there and there's a fire, don't run. And I'm talking about just tip floor fire specifically, right? I mean, and that's where a lot of this training will make sense, and your fire department can help. But it is understanding, when they should take a fire extinguisher and utilize it for a really small fire where there's not a lot of material around it, not a lot of risk around it, versus, how do you deal with it on a bigger scale? So, I mean, as you know, everything is unique and it's custom. So that's why, we definitely, I mean, I'm always pushing for plan, plan, plan. I know Israel just came out with some planning. A lot of the associations have done a great job putting together what they believe the tenets of the plan should be. At the end of the day, my perspective, and I mean, I know you feel kind of the same way, is that just you need a plan. You need to focus on it because without a plan, you're basically dead in the water. And I mean, I don't know, maybe you can take it from an insurance perspective. When you get in, I mean, you had told me in the past that you used to, check the box. Now, I mean, if you can kind
Yeah.
of give a little bit of insight on what you do when you go into one of these facilities, and how you're looking for risk and testing and all the other things.
Yeah, we really are looking for kind of a site-specific plan program, and that's gonna have huge benefits down the line, so that you can have the uniqueness of your facility well understood by the fire service, your management, and your employees. That's gonna make a huge difference because when and if an incident occurs, it's kind of like being in a sort of a time compression. Everything seems to happen with great rapidity, and we just need to be able to be sure everyone can take the proper 1, 2, or 3 steps. Very important. So let's wrap these points up and kind of put it all together for you. And Ryan has some great videos to bring this to life.
Well, do you
Um,
want to get into 7 and 8 and 9? I think.
oh yeah, that's what I'm going to do right now. Yeah, the next thing to consider in a combinational approach, and
You're not getting out
make
that
it
easy.
number 1, 2, or 3, and you folks will see why in a minute when I wrap it up, is fire protection engineers are trained to say automatic sprinklers or equivalent at the ceiling and the water and the adequate water supply. That is important and very helpful, but it's something that we're going to have to show you why it's not number 1 or 2 in a moment here. And if you don't have full automatic sprinklers, if you just have sprinklers to cool the vertical steel supports, the little slender columns that hold the building up, that's vital because that's kind of what's holding the building up, are those vertical supports. So even if you don't have that full protection, there still is something you can do with a partial solution. Another element, and really it's kind of what was built in the past, it's kind of forgotten about with modern construction, is manually operable roof vents. And this would really be for the fire service to operate because they want to create a draft, or they want to get the heat to go where they want it to, get the smoke out. But if you have some manually operable roof vents, that's really helpful. They can vent the roof for you, but sometimes they got to get on the roof. You got a big fat guy like me, 250 pounds, a 50-pound saw, and running around on the roof. Maybe it's not safe to do that, and maybe the fire captain says don't go up there. Or they could start. It could take a while to make these trench cuts in the roof deck, which is also very damaging to your roof, by the way.
Well, and
And
I think that's a great point, Jim,
yeah,
right? I mean, the idea is, okay, so if you do have a fire, how are you going to ensure that, again, most importantly, you protect your employees, right? Secondarily, I mean, obviously it's going to be your building and your business, but at the same time, I mean, these guys go up, and if you don't have these, and you're not thinking about these, and the fire department is literally going to ruin, they're going to basically put holes in your roof, right? They're also, they're going to look when it's done, and they're going to look at your steel support beams and say, okay, is this building, one that needs to be completely taken out? Is it, or is it something that can still be occupied? So, again, I
yeah.
think these are the specific things that can help from a business continuity perspective as well, and that's why I think they're down the list as well. So.
Yeah, you don't need a lot of roof vents, but it's just something that we used to install like in every factory everywhere. But in the last 30 years or so, for some reason, just weren't being just haven't installed them. So they're really easy thing to retrofit. And then finally, kind of wrapping this up, developing that rapport with the fire department to provide any training for them, or specialized equipment. Maybe they need a specialized nozzle or something called a deck gun. Anything that would be special just for your facility. you could acquire it and then keep it in a secure place, so when they came on site they would have it. But also having multiple meetings with them, maybe providing lunch or pizzas, and just getting to talk about some of the things that you can do. Because sometimes they come in and they just do a walkthrough and leave. That's really for them, so that they can figure things out remotely when they're back at the station what they would do. But that's not really for you. The way to get the information out of them is to get them to all sit down, break bread, and try to find out some of the planning and things that you can do. And you'll get it out of them, but it might take a couple of efforts there. But keep going, and it's worth it. And then finally, having some of the tools and technology for proper backup, like an emergency generator, maybe afterwards if power's out, because maybe the electrical main got damaged, but you still want to power your phones, computers, some critical equipment, charging equipment, um, being able to have some critical equipment to keep your business going, and then get it back up and running a lot faster, and possibly even just an office offsite, things like that you could utilize with some phones or communication equipment, in case you can't go back on site for a couple days, something like that. It's just good to have these contingencies planned for, and that can help speed the recovery and make it a little easier. All right, enough of me talking. I'll finish up here with conclusions. And this is really probably the most important part of my whole presentation, because we talked about early detection. We talked about application of pre-wetting foam, water, and we talked about sprinklers at the roof kind of being in the DNA of fire protection engineers. But what's different about your occupancy and this occupancy, and probably why NFPA and other code bodies haven't really addressed it that well, is because what we really have to do is take the fight from the ceiling down to the seat of the fire. Remember that picture with that high vertical clearance? So we got to get the ability to fight this thing from the ceiling right down to the seat of the fire. Point blank is best, but as close as possible. And that's what the newer technologies that are available with nozzles, foam, cameras can do now. Also monitor nozzles with water that can come through these systems. So that's the most important element that I want you to kind of take away from this. And just reemphasizing again, if you can provide only one form of sprinkler head, because I know doing the whole building, if it doesn't have any, could be like $1 million. If you could just protect the structural steel elements in the area with the most combustibles, that can really save your building. And that huge fire loss that I was talking about earlier, $70-80 million loss, that's actually how the building was saved, because they had these little sprinkler heads that just protected, each head protected one column, and that kept the building upright. And just, reemphasizing these points again. And I think if you take this combinational approach, look at all these 10 elements, and actually do the work to train and plan and make these improvements, you got this. You really can make a lot more progress and make a bigger dent in this than you think. So I want you to feel like you do have control over this. If you lean it into gear and put your back into it, you really can. And Ryan and I and folks like Ryan and these industry groups are putting together better plans and better advice than I saw just 4 years ago.
Sure. No, and I think, it goes to say, just to give an idea, Jim and I met at an NFPA conference. So, you know, again, just like being with Fire Rover, we have a front row seat. I'm also, I'm fortunate that I get to sit on, I'm on NFPA's hazard material recommended practices. And, so I get to see from fire protection perspective. So the idea, originally Jim and I had wrote this article that International Fire Protection picked up as well. And it was highlighted in a lot of, of our waste 360 and waste, our waste publications. But, again, how do you reduce your risk profile? And, this is really a big piece of this, right? So it's how do you reduce your risk profile on every one of your sites? And, I do appreciate everything that Jim has done, for helping educate myself and others. So if you guys have questions, please, please feel free to ask. I'm going to get into, and again, I'm going to get into a little bit of how the approach that Jim has said is, unique in the sense of, how we look at it from a fire protection perspective. Um, so if you do have questions, please let us know. I mean, Jim's still on, and Jim, if you have anything that you want to kind of talk through, but what we do internally for specific waste and recycling, right? Because again, the whole idea is this, right? Is that you guys have to plan for prevention, or the operators. I mean, you can do so many things to stop fires, and the associations out there, you can put in recommended practices and you can educate the public and you can do all the things. I mean, you guys definitely have a piece of this. And then also from a professional response perspective, it's the industry that's responsible for getting the fire professionals on board with the comfort level of fighting these fires. And again, it's hard that it doesn't happen as an industrial perspective, or as like an industry perspective. So it's difficult for a SWANA to go to NFPA and really work on what the recommended practices and have that trickle down to the jurisdictions, because this professional response, and I mean, Jim can talk to me if he agrees, but really at the end of the day, the professional response is a jurisdictional response, right?
That's
It's
correct.
based.
And if you think about it, the fire department has to handle hospitals, houses, warehouses. They're handling every occupancy, brush fire, electrical substation. So in order to really get the information you need from them, to kind of configure your training and what you're going to do, really just getting them to sit down and then seeing what's unique about the occupancy, and then your layout, um, is a key element, because they're tasked with responding to anything and everything at any given time. So, and then your occupancy is a little unique. So you want to have a plan, a battle plan that speaks to that uniqueness.
Absolutely. And I think, and that's where, again, if you can have the equipment ready for the fire department because potentially they can't afford that equipment, or they're just, they're not going to invest in a Lancer nozzle because again, they don't need it for a hospital, right? They only have
Yeah.
two tip floors in their jurisdiction. So, just to help your team, instead of, preparing for the fire department to get on site, as your goal as an operator is to ensure that you, that you're giving the fire department the least amount of excuses not to go in and fight a fire. But again, I think the internal response, that's where I see the big opportunity, right? How fast you get to a fire. And that's where, again, I don't want to turn this into a commercial, but at the same time, that's where our Fire Rover and our company really focuses on, the uniqueness of, we're not looking for the radiant temperature of a fire to actually set off a sprinkler system, a sprinkler head that's 40 feet in the air at 180 degrees, just so that you pop the tincture so that it goes off, right? We're looking for the fire, the direct heat inside, and the smoke inside inside either your equipment, your tip floor, or any of the other hazards that we protect. So and again, Jim said this a few years back, but it's like with our heat, like with our thermal software or our thermal protection, we are trying to set that tripwire earlier in the process as possible.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
when you look at it, it's the goal is you want to catch a fire in incipient stage. We can catch fires, and we have um, in heat stage, right? So it's preemptive maintenance where we're shutting down equipment, and I'll show a couple of those. When we see a heat abnormality that could turn into a fire, this is for ASR piles and scrap metal facilities where we see, that the temperatures will go up, or organic and compost fires, rubber fires, and others where, we have the potential to catch some of these fires earlier in the process. And again, there's no one out there that's going to say that the earlier you catch a fire, everyone says the opposite, right? Which is, the longer a fire has, it doubles in size and cost every 30 seconds, every minute, every 5 minutes, whatever, the approach is. We all know that catching it earlier is going to give you a better outcome. So with
Hey,
that being
Brian,
said, yeah,
can you go back to that chart that you had there with the incipient
sure.
stage there? Yeah, I just, when I think about that pre-incipient, incipient stage when it can be detected now, I think about that's when a fire doesn't hit our physical senses. So that's kind of when you can't really see the fire, you can't really smell it with your nose, you can't feel it with your hands, things like that. So by the time a fire is something we can see or feel with our hands or fills our nose with smoke, by that time we're already in probably the flame or fire stage. So we're already really far down the path. So that's what's important to realize is to take advantage of technology that can detect a fire before our nose or eyes can tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question about tire fires, so rubber feedstock fires in adjacent to transfer stations, and I'll get into that. I'll show you guys a video of a rubber feedstock fire that we actually had out in 4.5 minutes before the fire department arrived. Let me just kind of walk through. So basically, we have a couple different um, we have a couple different um, protection capabilities, right? And this is our Fire Rover unit. Everybody's pretty familiar with this. It's a 20 by 8 by 8 container. It's 100% self-contained. It only needs internet electricity. If it's an outdoor operation, we typically have a 22-foot mast. If it's an indoor operation, we'll have this unit either inside, outside, and we custom pipe. So if you think inside your 40-foot ceiling, you're going to see cameras and a nozzle, and they're out of the way, and they're your loader operator is not going to hit them, and really they're there, and the sprinkler system is a great system. No one's saying that they're not, but they're when you're dealing with a 30, 40, 50-foot building and you have a ton of line of sight. We believe that our solution is well superior for a number of reasons. But over our solutions have evolved. So basically, we offer the thermal only solution, which is just cameras and nozzles, and then we have these enforcer cap units that you can use. These are nice because you're able to shoot 90 feet with our wetting agents. And again, they're also nice to have on site for the fire department. When they get there, all they do is turn two nozzles. They don't have to hook up to a hose. And while they're spending the 5 minutes rolling their hoses out, getting everything prepared, they can come in and start fighting these right away, assuming that they're trained on them. Now, the second thing that we offer is our typical Fire Rover solution, which is that box works for about 8 to 12 minutes. Again, we catch it early enough. So, I mentioned the rubber fire before. We still had 40% left of our tank after we were done, fighting that fire. But, that solution works really well if there's no access to water on site. And then, it works really good for transfer stations, MRFs, and others when you do have a backup. When you have a backup sprinkler system, or you have a fire department that's close enough, within 6 to 12 minutes. So we're spraying and then they're on site. The Fire Rover sprinkler replacement, and this is unique. We're doing a lot of applications in lithium-ion batteries outside of waste and recycling. But what we've built with this is that we've replaced sprinkler systems with cameras and nozzles. So, for example, we just did one of the large OEMs, electric vehicle OEMs, recycling facilities, and we have 3 Fire Rover boxes, 8 cameras, 6 nozzles. So we're covering a pretty large footprint in the building. And then the fire department wanted to ensure that we would have continuous access to a water supply. So after the 6 to 12 minutes is up in each one of those Fire Rover boxes, we have a manifold that comes off the back, that they can do a quick connect from the outside and use the water from the public source through their trucks. So the idea is that now you can use the Fire Rover system. We would have it the exact same solution as our existing, but we also now can shoot for as long as there's access to water from the city. And then the Fire Rover deluge system, and it's interesting. I mean, Jim and I first met about waste and recycling, or waste to energy facilities, and paper facilities as well. But the idea is that we use your existing infrastructure. We replace the nozzles with Fire Rover nozzles, and we're able to do a continuous deluge. So we're shooting just water, or we can do a full system with an incubator or with an inductor, with any sort of wetting agent. But with that being said, we can actually provide that bigger solution when the Fire Rover wouldn't be enough in itself. So again, I think
Hey,
as
Brian.
we evolve, yep.
quick point here. So a lot of times as a fire protection engineer, I'll be talking to plant managers and whatnot, and they'll say, well, we don't want to put water on a small fire because that'll cause water damage. And then I say, well, what do you think will happen when the fire department gets here? And then they kind of look, and I say, they're going to put water on it because the fire department puts water on the fire. But if you wait 5, 10, 15 minutes longer, the fire's bigger, they're going to have to put even more water on it. So it's going to cause even more water damage. So a little water right in the beginning is and knocks the fire out is can be extremely advantageous, especially in an occupancy where there's sensitivity to water and smoke, because you're reducing the amount of smoke developed that can cause a lot of problems with electronics. So you have to realize when the fire department gets there, if you do nothing, they're just going to put a ton of water on it and keep going. So you're basically doing their work in the first 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes from a remote in a safe manner that's going to keep that fire in a very small footprint.
Yeah, and I
Thanks.
appreciate, I think it's great. And I think, I mean, so this is, I know Kimiko, you had asked me this, this is a rubber feedstock fire. So what had happened is we see this, our unit's actually stuck out, or it's installed outside. We're actually hitting the side of the building, so the collateral assets, so that it can't be burned. So, and then also we're shooting an encapsulator agent. So it's a little different. I mean, Jim just mentioned having water, but when we shoot for that first 6 to 8 minutes, we're shooting the encapsulator agent that we use puts a reverse polarity around the water molecule, so it doesn't treat what it's hitting as water, so it doesn't steam off and it doesn't react the way that a water droplet would. And again, it's fluorine free. It works like a Pac-Man in the sense. So you can see this is a rubber fire. I mean, we have this out in 4.5 minutes. We called the fire department. We did everything that we needed to do from a communication protocol, but we'll gently keep working away at this fire continuously, right? And until we know, and the beauty of our system, it never resets, right? So we still have 40% left of our tank. We have built-in fire watch, so the days of spraying your piles for 3 days because the fire department's requiring you to do fire watch and continuously spray basically technology has protected that. Just to get into one of the things that this actually happened last week. This was a tip floor fire where, again, you're going to see the fire starts. Let me open this up. You're going to see the fire starts right there, right? And these are our 4 cameras. So the way the solution works, our 4 cameras, typically we'll have a thermal camera and HD cameras as well. We also have a camera that is part of the gun scope, which is basically right on the nozzle. We call that the nozzle cam, and then we need one for depth. So, we're constantly looking at false alarms. And I think one of the big issues, and the reason why a lot of people say, why would you go back to having a human make the decision on whether or not there's a fire or not? That human element is really, really, really important because, again, they can see it. And, in our locations, it's not like we're sitting in a big storage area that nothing ever moves. These are live locations. There's loaders working, there's people working. And again, we see this fire, it goes back to our UL certified agent. They look at it, they verify it, they follow the communication protocol, then they charge the unit that's on site, and they'll start to shoot this fire that started. And again, people are working, but they're not seeing it. So this will
Exactly.
give it.
You can do something about it before it hits your senses, because by that point you're in that the latter stage of fire growth and proliferation, and that's what we want to avoid.
So we've actually charged the unit. Our human is making sure, our agent is making sure that the loader moves, so we didn't hit the loader, and then they hit it, right? So it's like, we also have lights, and we have sirens that go off from a protection perspective. But again, it's not a deluge that's just deluging the entire system and not worrying about anybody who's out there. It actually can think, and it can, make decisions, and, it can shut off and restart again if there's another fire. If a fire starts in another area, we're able to do so. And the beauty is there is no cleanup here because it's environmentally friendly and it evaporates. So, you know, literally the loader now knows that this existed, right? With this customer specifically, the loader he never saw smoke, never saw anything else in the operation, and it was already taken care of before they saw it. This is one of the things where we're actually trending heat. So this is on an in-feed line. This actually started a fire, but typically, the way this works is we'll if we see an abnormality, we'll let the operators know. They look at it, they stop. We also have this actually is just a camera that is set strategically where it'll shut down the entire conveyor operation. So it's kind of nice to have that, right, where at least we know that the fire is isolated to the specific area where it started and it's not moving throughout the operation, which we've seen happen a
Oh,
number of times.
that's critical, Ryan, because in every really large fire scenarios, a lot of times when we have belts, other type of moving equipment, robots, guided vehicles, large conveying systems, carousels, one of the big problems in fire proliferation can be moving equipment. So having an interlock just to the existing emergency power off circuit, just as if someone were to hit the mushroom button, but just plugged right in and interconnected with some relays, easy to do. It can make a huge difference.
Sorry, I was a couple people. Can you guys see? Yep. Okay, cool. All right. And one of the things too, I mean, I'm not a big fan of fire extinguishers, right? And again, I mean, Jim, I don't know. I mean, you can give us your opinion on this, but basically in this one, the reason you saw that big mess before, that was actually, two employees right here. Two employees are shooting it with a fire sprinkler system. Again, they shouldn't be there. It was a little bit unsafe. But at the same time, I mean, they're stopping us from shooting the fire rover because we don't want to shoot them with our stream. And, the fire is able to, just in this small, amount of time, get to that next level. So, I mean, my experience is I keep seeing it and it's like them poking the bear. I mean, you tell me, I mean, I don't know what
Oh,
you're.
yeah, it's all bad. And what I found from 35 years of doing this, I would go in and say, hey, what's been happening? Oh, we had a fire. Okay, what happened? Such and such, we grabbed an extinguisher and started applying it. And then I'll say, and then what happened? I know it's next, but I'll say, then what happened? Oh, we ran out of the extinguisher and we had to round up and get 2 more extinguishers. And then what happened? Well, we ran out of those and then we went and got 4. And then what happened? We ran around the entire, and it's like, oh my gosh. First of all, shouldn't be playing hero with this, number one. Number two, you just can't get enough extinguishers. Number three, if you use the tank like in a system like this, or water, which has in theory an inexhaustible supply, combination of both, you're getting the person away from the fire and you're hitting it with everything that you need without running out. So yeah, the fire extinguisher really is for a very small incipient fire only, like a wastebasket. And then the other thing that I kind of think of for the fire extinguisher is maybe an employee has to grab one to fight their way out of a corner or something, but that's about it.
So, I have a feeling that I have a feeling that one of my videos, someone is. Okay, it's off. Okay. So let me, I mean, just to kind of wrap things up, we have a ton of videos if you want to see them on our Fire Rover YouTube page. I mean, feel free to subscribe. I do believe, and I appreciate a lot of our customers allow us to share these, because, they want, I mean, every time we see a fire and every time we can see the front piece of it and really see what's happening, there's a learning from it, right? And I think for years and years you have forensic fire investigators that'll go into a waste facility and say, oh, it's a lithium-ion battery fire, and I don't know how they can figure it out based on the amount of blackened material that's there. And Jim, I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but
A lot of those is they're just some pencil whipping sometimes with either lithium ion or like an electrical source, but partially unconfirmed or not confirmed with forensic. So it's not always as accurate of a process as you might think.
sure, no, absolutely, and again, I think I'm going to put up, if you guys need, I mean, send me an email, and I'm happy to send Jim's contact as well. And if you have questions, feel free to stay on, and we'll walk through some videos. But if not, I appreciate you guys coming. I hope it was enjoyable. Jim, thank you so much as always. You've
You're
been
welcome.
very
I'm here for
helpful
any questions.
yeah, from a recommendation perspective, but thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions? We're here. We'll stick it through, man. Anybody got anything
Hey,
for us?
yeah, hey guys, it's Ron Benson with Action Environmental Interstate Waste.
Hey, Ron.
The Bronx, how you doing, Ryan? How you been?
Good. Good.
The Bronx facility. I mean, I had designed that, and I built that plant, and of course we put some strategic hose reels around as part of our fire prevention plan. And I can definitely see, and Ryan, you've been out to that site, the fire rover being, very advantageous with our stockpile. As you remember, we have an elevated tip floor that the trucks will tip off, goes down to the lower level recycling stockpile to the right, and then MSW. So it's a mixed tipping floor. But the question that I actually was trying to get to, long-winded here today for some reason, is when you're, I don't know if you recall this site, when you're at the viewing platform, you come down the back stairs where you can't really see the tipping floor that well, but you can see a lot of our QC stations where we have live bunkers underneath, which would be very difficult for the fire rover to even remotely get to. So I guess my question is there a miniature system or a downsized system in lieu of putting sprinklers in those live floor bunkers, just simply because just running the piping and breaking heads? Is there a system that has like your product, your materials that you use to extinguish the fire in a more of a compact form that could get the area that really you have the sprinklers above, and then you've got picking stations and conveyors, and where the material is stored in the live floor bunkers, you just can't get to, right?
Well,
And
I mean, I think we do a ton of bunker protection, right? And I think I think we have to take it from a specific level. We can put a camera and a nozzle, and typically, I mean, if it's a closed bunker, the answer is no, right? I mean, I mean, there's a lot of our customers that have had those types of fires, but if it's an open bunker, I mean, we do a ton of those in scrap metal and in MRFs and transfer in MRFs and and scrap metal. So I think it just depends. I mean, we need to get the best angle. So when I think of your facility, I know I know you had like the three layers of conveyors, and Jim, this is one where they the insurance companies wanted them to have sprinklers on all of their conveyors, right? Like basically
Everything else, yeah.
pretty close. And what we did was we took a fire rover box, we took over a storage area, but then we also had three nozzles and cameras strategically placed so that we could get like 80% view. And again, when we say like 80% direct view, there's always that indirect view that we can see. So that heat abnormality, because again, the fire is going to start, but it's not like it sits in one little spot, So I think we were able to see like 80% of the area. So Ron, I think to answer your question, I mean, we'd have to look and see. I can take a fire rover box with three risers, right, and we can hit three or four of these as long as they're open. We do, and I have some facilities. I can't show you the videos on like publicly, but I have some facilities that we do that for, and we've been able to successfully put fires out in those areas.
I think
Thanks, Ron.
yeah, I think it's a big area of concern, not only on the insurance side, I mean, for ourselves as operators. So, I mean, I don't know what the next step would be, especially in today's climate, but somewhere in the near future, hopefully we can gather back on site there. I'll make sure that that I get there this time and kind of really point out standing there, which is a lot easier than just trying to chat about it, what I'm talking about. But I think there must be something that we could do, even if it was off the wall that's behind it, that could kind of get a better angle perhaps on what we call phase 3 of the plant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we do. I mean,
Yeah.
and you say off the wall. I love it. I mean, that's the ricochet. I mean, and I'll show you a couple examples of how we do that in sites.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. I think I mean, because I've been out there. I mean, I understand that facility. I've been out there a couple times. I know Pete was out there. So if you want to take a picture of the specific area you're talking about off the, like, from the perspective where you get, or, you know, if you want to get on FaceTime, happy to do it. But I think that would be pretty helpful. You know, I mean, obviously in lieu of traveling right now, as the whole world is in lieu of traveling. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think Pete and I have been at the site enough times that, I mean, you know, I remember most of it, and I mean, we do have a layout as well in my files. So if you you know, if you want to get a picture of that specific area, we can see what we can do from kind of tying it into the rest of the protection.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We still have one of our main guys who's still out there on site, and I've got a giant construction project starting at that location for the ramp that goes to the elevated tip floor on May 4th. So maybe what I'll ask Billy Adelaide to do is, better than a picture, take a video of that area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And get it to Sal to shoot over to you, and then maybe the three of us could jump on a call and just chat about it.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. You know, and
All right.
again, if I can get, I mean, if he can be there live with my engineer, like if I can get Pete on the phone and have him like say, okay, I want to see the top, you know, like show me these areas. I mean, that's helpful. But if a video is definitely definitely would work.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. So is there any other questions? I know Kimiko asked about tire fires. So I mean, I did show the rubber feedstock. This is what happens after, you know, so they're shredding the tires inside the operation. They're coming out here through the shredder, and then, you know, you have these are the feedstock piles. So again, I think, you know, it works the exact same way, right? I'm going to look at it from a thermal perspective. We're going to, especially with a pile of tires, you know, we're going to look and see if there's a heat abnormality anywhere in those spots. And I know you had said you're in Puerto Rico. I mean, I've seen a ton of the fires that you guys have been having in the Virgin Islands. I thought it was St. Croix, but you know, so we can definitely handle rubber fires or rubber areas. You know, it's definitely something that we can handle. So
And from a fire protection standpoint, that the rapidity of that knockdown is like jaw dropping to us. We've never, in the fire protection community, we've never seen that kind of quick knockdown like that, because that's one of those ugly little fires that we're kind of trained to say, oh, that's going to go on for hours. And that's kind of our fire protection engineering community. That's the norm. So seeing that and seeing that kind of knockdown and control, that's astounding.
well, no, and I believe me. I mean, I think, you know, all of us, as you know, Brad created this with Jeremy and Pete, and you know, believe me, the day that we saw that fire and the day that we saw the power of everything that we thought it could do was a amazing day, right? Where it's like, oh my God, we literally just put out a 3,000-degree rubber fire in less than 4.5 minutes. So again, like when I say that, I mean, it's like, you know, yeah, you say that to any fire engineer and they look at you like, come on, dude, you know, like, no, you didn't.
Yep.
I mean, and all the other things. But, you know, I mean, there's a ton of different applications out there. And, you know, I do believe that waste and recycling, we've been blessed. I mean, they've really, you know, taken to our solution in, you know, relatively short manner, you know, 4 or 5 years. I mean, that's a blink of an eye in the fire protection industry. So do we have any other questions? I know I can't believe that I did not get a question from my friend Dave Rivas. I mean, David, are you on? I mean, no question from you at all? I thought you were going to hit us, but I guess last week it was all lithium-ion batteries. So um, he had like 5 questions on those. So all right, well, I'll if we have no more questions, you know, again, thank you, Jim, for being on, and you know, I appreciate it. And if anyone has any questions afterwards or they'd like the recording, please let me know. And Dave Rivas just said, "LOL, I'm here, no questions today." So the cat must have his tongue, which is good, man. I appreciate you being on there, and I'll send you the recording. So thank you guys. Have a good day. You know, stay safe
Everybody.
and keep up the good work. I mean, obviously, I appreciate everything the fire professionals and especially the essential workers in waste and recycling do, because they're out there
Absolutely.
making sure every day that everything's safe and doesn't smell bad. So it's important.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.